Sometimes the most unexpected miracles happen in the quietest hours of the night. A struggling single father working the graveyard shift to keep his family afloat. A powerful CEO's daughter battling demons that money can't heal. When their worlds collide in the sterile corridors of Metropolitan General Hospital, a nightly ritual begins that will shatter everything both families thought they knew about love, sacrifice, and what it truly means to care for someone. In the shadows between midnight rounds, two broken souls will discover that healing doesn't always require medicine. Sometimes it just needs a gentle hand and a willing heart. What started as a desperate man's last resort for steady income becomes a journey that will expose family secrets, challenge the boundaries of social class, and prove that the most profound connections often bloom in the most unlikely places. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The fluorescent lights of Metropolitan General Hospital cast harsh shadows across the polished floors as Joseph Davis pushed his maintenance cart down the empty corridor. It was 2:47 a.m., and the world outside had long since surrendered to sleep, but Joseph's night was just beginning. His calloused hands gripped the mop handle tighter than necessary, each stroke across the linoleum floor a desperate attempt to scrub away more than just the day's accumulated grime. At 34, Joseph looked older than his years. Deep lines etched around his eyes spoke of countless sleepless nights, worry carved into every feature. His hospital uniform, navy blue scrubs that had seen better days, hung loose on his increasingly thin frame. The weight loss wasn't intentional. When you're choosing between groceries and keeping the lights on, food often came second. The overnight custodial position at Metropolitan General paid $16.50 an hour, barely enough to cover rent on their cramped two-bedroom apartment in the roughest part of Millbrook Heights. But it was the only job Joseph could find that offered health insurance, and after what happened to Marcus 6 months ago, health insurance wasn't optional anymore. Marcus. The thought of his 14-year-old son sleeping restlessly at home sent a familiar pang through Joseph's chest. The boy tried to hide it, but Joseph could see the way Marcus favored his left leg, the subtle wince when he thought no one was looking. The accident had been a freak occurrence, a poorly maintained school stairwell that gave way during Marcus's rush to make it to class on time. The surgery had saved his leg, but the medical bills had destroyed their financial stability. $23,000 in medical debt. The number haunted Joseph's dreams when he managed to get any sleep at all. Insurance had covered most of it, but most still left a mountain of debt that grew larger each month with interest and late fees. Joseph had tried to work multiple jobs, but Marcus needed supervision for his physical therapy appointments, and missing too many shifts at any one job meant losing that job entirely. The night custodial position was supposed to be temporary, just until Joseph could find something better, something that paid enough to dig them out of this hole. But 6 months had passed, and better felt more like a fairy tale than a possibility. Joseph's business management degree, earned through night classes while working 2 jobs after high school, gathered dust in a frame on Marcus's dresser. These days, potential employers saw the gap in professional experience and the desperate edge in Joseph's voice during interviews. Desperation, he'd learned, wasn't attractive to hiring managers. Joseph paused his mopping to check his phone. A text from Mrs. Patterson, their 70-year-old neighbor who watched Marcus during Joseph's overnight shifts, glowed on the cracked screen. Marcus doing homework. Says his leg feels better today. Made him eat dinner. Relief and guilt warred. In Joseph's chest, Mrs. Patterson refused to accept payment for watching Marcus, claiming she enjoyed the company. But Joseph knew the proud woman was living on a fixed income, and her kindness was just another debt he couldn't repay. Everything in his life had become about debt, financial, emotional, social. He owed everyone and could pay no one. The worst part wasn't the exhaustion or the constant worry about money. The worst part was watching Marcus pretend everything was fine. The boy had stopped asking for things: new clothes, school supplies, the gaming console his friends talked about. Marcus had grown quiet, mature beyond his years, carrying a burden that no teenager should have to bear. He never complained about their cramped apartment or the generic brand cereal they ate for dinner some nights. Instead, he threw himself into his studies, as if academic achievement could somehow solve their problems. "I'm going to get a scholarship," Marcus had declared just last week, his young face set with determination that broke Joseph's heart. "Full ride. You won't have to worry about college money." Joseph had smiled and ruffled his son's hair, but inside he felt like he was drowning. Marcus shouldn't have to worry about scholarships or college money. He should be worried about typical teenage things: sports, friends, maybe a first crush. Instead, he was planning his future around his father's failures. The hospital corridors stretched endlessly before Joseph as he continued his rounds. Room after room of sleeping patients, each one representing someone else's crisis, someone else's moment of desperation. But they had insurance that worked, families that could afford the best care, lives that would continue seamlessly after their recovery. Joseph cleaned around their privilege, invisible to their world of comfort and security. His shift supervisor, Randy Coleman, was a decent enough man who looked the other way when Joseph occasionally had to take calls about Marcus's appointments. But Randy had made it clear that the custodial staff was expendable. Budget cuts were always looming, and senior employees like Joseph, despite only 6 months on the job, were expected to work faster, cover more ground, and never complain. "Economy's rough out there," Randy had mentioned just yesterday, his tone casual but the message clear. Lot of people would be grateful for steady work like this. Joseph got the message. Keep your head down, work harder, and don't rock the boat. So he pushed his cart a little faster, stayed a little later, and swallowed his pride a little deeper each night. As he worked, Joseph did mental arithmetic, a cruel habit he couldn't break. Rent was due in 8 days. The electric bill was already 2 weeks late. Marcus's next physical therapy appointment was scheduled for Friday, with a copay they couldn't afford to miss. The numbers never added up, no matter how many times he ran the calculations. Sometimes, in the darkest moments of his midnight shifts, Joseph wondered if Marcus would be better off with someone else. His sister lived in Oregon with her accountant, husband, and their twin daughters. She'd offered to take Marcus just temporarily until Joseph got back on his feet. The offer was generous, well-intentioned, and absolutely heartbreaking. Marcus was all Joseph had left. After Sarah died in the car accident 7 years ago, it had been just the two of them against the world. Joseph had managed to build a decent life for them, a small but comfortable apartment, steady work, even some savings. But one medical emergency had unraveled everything he'd worked to build. The hospital's ventilation system hummed overhead, a constant background noise that had become the soundtrack to Joseph's failure. Each night, as he cleaned floors that would be dirty again by morning, he felt himself disappearing a little more. The professional clothes hanging in his closet at home felt like costumes for a life he used to live. The business cards in his wallet, remnants of networking events and job interviews, mocked him with their promises of career advancement and financial stability. Joseph paused outside the elevator, catching his reflection in the polished metal doors. The man staring back at him looked defeated, shoulders slumped under the weight of responsibility he could no longer carry. This wasn't who he'd planned to become. This wasn't the life he'd promised Sarah he'd build for their son. But as he pushed the button to continue to the next floor, Joseph straightened his shoulders just slightly. Tomorrow, he'd send out more job applications. Tomorrow, he'd call about payment plans for the medical bills. Tomorrow, he'd find a way to be the father Marcus deserved. Tonight, though, he had floors to clean and a paycheck to earn. It wasn't much, but it was something. And sometimes when you're drowning, something is enough to keep you afloat for one more day. The elevator dinged softly as it reached the 7th floor, the cardiac intensive care unit. Joseph had grown to dread this floor during his rounds, not because of the work, but because of the memories it stirred. Room 714 was where Sarah had spent her final 3 days after the accident, machines breathing for her while Joseph held her hand and begged her not to leave them. 7 years had passed, but stepping onto this floor still felt like walking through broken glass. Tonight was no different. Joseph wheeled his cart out of the elevator, the familiar weight of grief settling on his shoulders like an old unwelcome coat. He'd been 27 then, working as an assistant operations manager for a regional logistics company. The future had seemed bright, modest, but promising. They'd been saving for a house, talking about giving Marcus a little brother or sister, planning weekend trips to the mountains. Sarah had been driving home from her job at the elementary school when a drunk driver ran a red light and shattered their world in an instant. The grief counselor had warned Joseph that devastating loss could either break a person or forge them into something stronger. What she hadn't mentioned was that it could do both simultaneously, leaving you functioning but fundamentally altered, like a bone that heals crooked after a bad break. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Joseph began his methodical cleaning routine, muscle memory guiding him while his mind wandered to darker places. After Sarah's death, he tried to maintain their old life for Marcus's sake. Keep the same apartment, the same routines, the same bedtime stories. But grief had made him unreliable at work, missing meetings because he'd forgotten to set his alarm, spacing out during important presentations, arriving late because he'd sat in his car crying in the parking lot. His supervisor had been understanding. At first, bereavement leave, flexible scheduling, even a temporary reduction in responsibilities. But companies, Joseph learned, had limited patience for broken people. After 6 months of decreased performance, he'd been quietly let go during a restructuring. The severance package had been generous enough to cover them for a few months, but not generous enough to heal a shattered man. The job search that followed had been brutal. Joseph's resume showed promise, but interviews revealed a man still drowning in loss. He'd fumble questions, lose his train of thought mid-sentence, or worse, break down completely when asked about gaps in his employment. Potential employers could smell desperation and instability from across a conference table. Eventually, Joseph had taken whatever work he could find: security guard at a shopping mall, data entry clerk for an insurance company, night shift warehouse worker. Each job paid less than the last, and none offered the kind of benefits a single father needed. He'd been slowly sliding down the economic ladder, rung by rung, while trying to maintain the illusion of stability for Marcus. The boy had been 7 when Sarah died, old enough to understand that mommy wasn't coming home, but too young to grasp the full implications of their loss. Joseph had become both parents overnight, learning to braid hair and pack school lunches while battling his own devastating grief. Some days, Marcus's needs were the only thing that got Joseph out of bed. "Daddy, why are you sad all the time?" Marcus had asked one evening, maybe a year after the accident. They'd been sitting at their small kitchen table, pushing food around their plates rather than eating. Joseph had looked into his son's eyes, Sarah's eyes, warm brown and infinitely trusting, and realized that his grief was becoming Marcus's burden. From that moment, he tried harder to hide the worst of his pain, to be present for the little boy who'd already lost so much. For a while, it had worked. Joseph found a rhythm, a way to function, if not thrive. Marcus excelled in school. Made friends, played Little League baseball. They weren't the family they'd planned to be, but they were surviving. Joseph had even started dating again, cautiously, after 3 years of self-imposed isolation. Then came Marcus's accident 6 months ago, and Joseph realized how precarious their stability had always been. One medical emergency had exposed the truth. They'd been living paycheck to paycheck, one crisis away from disaster. The comfortable middle-class life Joseph thought he'd rebuilt for them had been an illusion, held together by wishful thinking and willful blindness to their financial reality. Now, pushing his mop across the ICU floor, Joseph felt the weight of every promise he'd made to Sarah on her deathbed. "I'll take care of him," he'd whispered, holding her cooling hand. "I'll give him everything he needs. I'll be enough for both of us." 7 years later, Joseph was failing on every count. Marcus needed stability, and Joseph could barely keep them housed. Marcus needed opportunities, and Joseph couldn't afford the sports fees, music lessons, or summer camps that other parents took for granted. Marcus needed a future, and Joseph couldn't even pay for the physical therapy that would ensure his son could walk without pain. The worst part was watching Marcus adapt to their circumstances with the resilience that only young people possessed. The boy had learned to shop at thrift stores without complaint, to accept generic brands without question, to understand that maybe next month usually meant never. Marcus had become an expert at wanting less, expecting less, being grateful for scraps. Just last week, Marcus had shown Joseph a college brochure he'd picked up at school. "Look, Dad," he'd said, pointing to the financial aid information. "They have programs for people like us, students from low-income families. I could qualify for grants, work-study programs." Joseph had smiled and nodded, but inside, his heart had shattered. His 14-year-old son was already planning his life around their poverty, already accepting that he'd have to fight for every opportunity that other teenagers took for granted. Sarah would have been devastated to see them like this. She'd grown up poor herself, the daughter of a single mother who cleaned houses to pay rent. Sarah had sworn their future family would be different. Secure, stable, free from the constant worry about money that had defined her youth. "Our son will never have to choose between school supplies and lunch money," she'd said once, rubbing her pregnant belly while they'd painted the nursery. "He'll never have to wear shoes with holes in them or pretend he's not hungry because there's no food in the house." But here they were, and Marcus was learning all the lessons Sarah had hoped to spare him. How to stretch $1 until it screamed. How to smile when other people complained about problems that seemed impossibly luxurious. How to carry shame like a secret, invisible to everyone but yourself. Joseph paused his cleaning to check his phone again. Another text from Mrs. Patterson. Marcus fell asleep doing homework at kitchen table. Covered him with blanket. "He's a good boy, Joseph. You're doing better than you think." The kindness in her words hit Joseph like a physical blow. He leaned against the wall, struggling to breathe around the tightness in his chest. He wasn't doing better than he thought. He was failing, slowly but surely, and the only person who couldn't see it was the boy who depended on him most. Tomorrow was Marcus's physical therapy appointment. The copay was $60 they didn't have, but Joseph would find a way. He always found a way, even if it meant choosing between gas for the car and groceries for the week. Marcus's recovery was non-negotiable, even if everything else in their life was falling apart. Joseph resumed his work, each sweep of the mop a small act of defiance against the circumstances trying to defeat them. He might be cleaning floors at 3 a.m., but he was earning money. He might be exhausted and overwhelmed, but he was still standing. He might be failing at everything else, but he was still fighting. The promise he'd made to Sarah echoed in his mind with every step. I'll be enough for both of us. 7 years later, Joseph was still trying to figure out what enough looked like. But as long as Marcus was safe, healthy, and loved, he'd keep trying, even if it killed him. It was approaching 4 a.m. when Joseph reached the 10th floor, the private wing, where Metropolitan General housed its most affluent patients. The floors here were marble instead of linoleum, the walls adorned with original artwork instead of generic hospital prints. Even the air seemed different, less antiseptic, and more like the lobby of an expensive hotel. Joseph rarely encountered anyone on this floor during his shifts. The wealthy patients slept soundly behind closed doors, attended by private nurses who worked in whispered efficiency. The families who could afford these rooms didn't pace the corridors at all hours like the relatives in the general wards. They had comfortable suites, catered meals, and the kind of confidence that came from knowing money could solve most problems. Tonight felt different, though. As Joseph rounded the corner near the elevator bank, he heard something that made him pause. Soft crying, barely audible above the hum of the ventilation system. It was the sound of someone trying very hard not to be heard, the kind of quiet desperation that Joseph recognized from his own darkest moments. He followed the sound down the hallway, his rubber-soled shoes silent on the polished marble. The crying seemed to be coming from the family lounge, a spacious room with leather, furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city lights. During visiting hours, this was where well-dressed families gathered to discuss treatment options with expensive specialists. At 4 a.m., it should have been empty. Joseph hesitated at the doorway. His job was to clean and move on, not to investigate. Every unusual sound, Randy had made it clear that custodial staff should be invisible, especially on the private floors where discretion was paramount. But the crying continued, soft and broken, and Joseph found himself unable to walk away. He knocked gently on the doorframe. "Excuse me, is everything okay? Is everything okay?" The crying stopped immediately. Joseph could hear someone moving inside, rustling fabric and muffled sniffling. After a moment, a young woman's voice called out, carefully controlled but still shaky, "I'm fine. Thank you." Joseph should have left. He then should have respected her privacy and continued with his rounds. But something in her voice, a particular quality of desperate composure, reminded him too much of Marcus trying to hide his pain. Joseph had learned to recognize when someone was drowning while trying to appear fine. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said softly, not moving from the doorway. "I'm just doing my cleaning rounds. I can come back later if you need some time." "No, it's okay. You can come in." Joseph pushed his cart into the lounge and immediately understood why she'd been crying. The young woman sat curled in one of the leather armchairs, looking impossibly small against the oversized furniture. She was maybe 25, with the kind of natural beauty that expensive clothes and perfect makeup couldn't create but could certainly enhance. Tonight, though, her designer dress was wrinkled. Her carefully styled hair had come loose from its pins and her face was blotchy from crying, but it was her eyes that stopped Joseph cold. They held the same haunted exhaustion he saw in his own mirror every morning, the look of someone who'd been fighting battles that no one else could see. "I'm sorry," she said, hastily wiping her face with tissues from an expensive leather purse. "I know I shouldn't be here this late. I can leave if you need to clean." "No need to apologize," Joseph said gently, beginning to dust the side tables with movements that were more automatic than necessary. "Sometimes the quiet hours are the hardest." She looked at him with surprise, as if she wasn't used to hospital staff speaking to her like a person rather than a problem to be managed. "You work nights?" "Every night," Joseph confirmed, moving to empty a small wastebasket. "Been doing the overnight shift here for about 6 months now. That must be difficult, being away from your family all night." Joseph paused in his work. Most people on this floor didn't make small talk with the cleaning staff, didn't ask personal questions or seem genuinely interested in the answers. "It has its challenges," he said carefully, "but we all do what we have to do." The young woman nodded, and Joseph caught something in her expression, a flicker of understanding that suggested she knew something about doing what you had to do, even when it wasn't what you wanted. "I'm Harper," she said suddenly, as if the name had escaped before she could stop it. "Joseph." He straightened up from his dusting, taking a moment to really look at her. Up close, he could see that her expensive dress couldn't hide how thin she'd become, how her collarbones stood out sharply above the neckline. Her hands shook slightly as she clutched the tissues, and Joseph recognized the tremor. He'd seen it in patients dealing with severe stress or illness. "Are you visiting someone?" he asked, though he immediately regretted the question. On this floor, visiting someone usually meant watching them die slowly and expensively. Harper's face crumpled slightly before she regained control. "My father, he's been here for 3 weeks now. The doctors say he's stable, but..." She trailed off, but Joseph understood. Stable wasn't the same as getting better. Stable was medical speak for not dying today, but we can't promise tomorrow. "I'm sorry," Joseph said, and meant it. "It's hard, watching someone you love suffer." Harper looked up at him sharply, something shifting in her expression. "You sound like you know." Joseph leaned against his mop handle, studying this young woman who sat alone in a family lounge at 4 a.m., crying where she thought no one would see. "Lost my wife 7 years ago. Car accident. She spent 3 days in the ICU before..." He stopped, surprised that he'd shared something so personal with a stranger. "I'm sorry," Harper whispered, and the genuine sympathy in her voice caught Joseph off guard. People usually offered perfunctory condolences when they learned about Sarah. Quick expressions of sympathy that were more about their own discomfort than his loss. But Harper's response felt different, like someone who understood that grief wasn't something you got over, just something you learned to carry. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, two people who'd found themselves in the quiet spaces between midnight and dawn, both carrying burdens that felt too heavy to bear alone. "Do you mind if I ask?" Harper began hesitantly, then stopped herself. "Never mind, it's not my business." "Go ahead," Joseph found himself saying. "At 4 a.m., normal rules don't really apply." Harper smiled slightly at that, the first real smile he'd seen from her. "I was going to ask, what brought you here? To this job, I mean. You seem like you might have done something else before." Joseph considered the question. He could give her the simple answer: medical bills, desperate circumstances, limited options. But something about Harper's presence, her genuine interest, made him want to be honest. "I used to work in business management," he said. "Had a job, decent salary. After Sarah died, I kind of fell apart. Lost the job, couldn't find anything comparable. Been working my way down the ladder ever since." He paused. "My son needs insurance for his medical treatments, and this job provides that. Sometimes you do what you have to do for the people you love." Harper nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving his face. "The people you love," she repeated softly. "Yes, I understand that." There was something in her tone, a weight, a resignation that made Joseph study her more carefully. She spoke like someone much older than her apparent years, like someone who'd learned difficult lessons about love and sacrifice and the prices both extracted. "Your father," Joseph said gently. "Is he Richard Wilson?" Harper said, and Joseph felt his breath catch. Richard Wilson, CEO of Wilson Healthcare Systems, one of the largest hospital networks in the state. His face had been on the cover of business magazines, his company worth billions. "You're Harper Wilson," Joseph said, the pieces falling into place. The private floor, the expensive clothes, the way the nurses had been whispering in the hallways about their VIP patient in room 1012. Harper's face closed off immediately, walls slamming back into place. "I should go," she said, standing quickly and reaching for her purse. "Wait," Joseph said, not sure why he was stopping her. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I don't care who your father is. I just saw someone who was hurting, and I wanted to help." Harper paused, her hand on her purse strap, studying his face as if searching for deception. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because her shoulders relaxed slightly. "People usually care very much who my father is," she said quietly. "It's usually the only thing they care about." Joseph thought about that, about what it might be like to have your identity so tied to someone else's success that people couldn't see you as an individual. "Must be lonely," he said finally. Harper's eyes filled with tears again, but she blinked them back. "You have no idea." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken understanding. Joseph continued his cleaning routine, but his movements were slower now, more thoughtful. He'd learned to recognize when someone needed space to talk. And Harper Wilson, despite her wealth and privilege, looked like someone who'd been carrying secrets for far too long. 3 weeks, Harper said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's been unconscious for 3 weeks. The doctors keep saying he's stable, that his vitals are good, but he won't wake up." Joseph paused in his dusting. "What happened?" Harper's laugh was bitter, devoid of any humor. "Heart attack. At the office, of course. He was working late, reviewing quarterly reports when his secretary found him collapsed at his desk." She pressed her hands to her face. "Do you know what his last words to me were? Harper, we'll discuss your concerns about the foundation later. I have more important things to deal with right now." The pain in her voice was raw, immediate. Joseph had heard enough deathbed confessions and final conversations during his time at the hospital to recognize the particular agony of unfinished business with someone you love. "I'm sure he didn't mean—" Joseph began. But Harper cut him, off with a sharp shake of her head. No, he meant it. He always meant it. Harper stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the city lights below. "My father built Wilson Healthcare Systems from nothing, started with one small clinic in a poor neighborhood, and turned it into a multi-billion-dollar empire. He saved thousands of lives, created thousands of jobs, changed the entire landscape of healthcare in this region." Joseph waited, sensing there was more to the story, but somewhere along the way, Harper continued, her breath fogging the glass, "he forgot why he started. The clinics in poor neighborhoods got sold off to make room for more profitable ventures. The free community health programs got cut to improve margins. The foundation that was supposed to help uninsured patients became a tax shelter that barely helped anyone." She turned back to face Joseph, and he could see the weight of her family's legacy written in the lines around her eyes. "I tried to talk to him about it, showed him the reports, the statistics about how many people we were turning away. I wanted to revive the community programs, expand the foundation's reach, go back to what Wilson Healthcare was supposed to be about. And he didn't want to hear it," Joseph guessed. "He said I was naive, idealistic, that I didn't understand how business worked." Harper's voice cracked slightly. "He said if I wanted to play with charity work, I could volunteer at someone else's organization, but Wilson Healthcare had shareholders to consider." Joseph found himself thinking about Marcus's medical bills, about all the families he'd met in waiting rooms who were choosing between treatment and bankruptcy. The Wilson name was on half the buildings in this hospital, but he'd never connected it to the young woman crying alone at 4 a.m. "So you've been fighting him on this," Joseph said. It wasn't a question, Harper nodded. "For 2 years, every board meeting, every family dinner, every conversation we had, I kept pushing, kept showing him the data, kept begging him to remember. why he became a doctor in the first place. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. The night he had his heart attack, I'd finally gotten the board to agree to review my proposal for expanding the foundation. Dad was furious, said I'd gone behind his back, undermined his authority. That's when he said those words to you. Those were the last words my father may ever say to me, Harper whispered, and they were about how I wasn't important enough for his time. Joseph stopped pretending to clean and gave Harper his full attention. You know that's not true, right? About you not being important. Harper's smile was sad and tired. Do I? I've spent my entire adult life trying to prove myself, worthy of his respect, worthy of a voice in the company that bears our family name. I have an MBA from Wharton, a medical degree I never used because he said the business needed me more, and 5 years of experience running hospital operations. But to him, I'm still just his little girl playing with ideas above her understanding. The frustration in her voice was familiar to Joseph. The same tone Marcus used when talking about his father's struggles, the same sense of being seen as less capable than you knew yourself to be. What's the foundation supposed to do? Joseph asked. Your proposal, I mean. Harper's eyes lit up slightly, the first real spark of passion Joseph had seen from her. Everything we used to do and more. Free clinics in underserved neighborhoods, sliding scale payment programs for families who make too much for Medicaid but not enough for private insurance, mobile health units for rural communities, mental health support for teenagers, addiction treatment programs that actually focus on recovery instead of just profit. Joseph felt his chest tighten. Programs like that might have saved his family from their current situation. If Wilson Healthcare had offered sliding scale payments or financial assistance, Marcus's surgery might not have bankrupted them. Sounds like it could help a lot of people, he said carefully. Thousands, Harper said with conviction. Maybe tens of thousands if we do it right. The money is there. Wilson Healthcare had record profits last year. We could fund these programs without impacting shareholder dividends at all. But Dad, she trailed off, her shoulders sagging. But your father saw it as throwing money away. He saw it as my attempt to turn his life's work into a charity. Harper returned to her chair, suddenly looking exhausted. Maybe he was right. Maybe I am naive. Maybe you can't run a successful business and still prioritize helping people over profit margins. Joseph thought about his own son, about Mrs. Patterson watching Marcus for free because she understood what it meant to need help. He thought about Randy Coleman, who looked the other way when Joseph needed to take personal calls. He thought about Harper herself, sitting alone in a hospital lounge at 4 a.m., crying over a father who'd dismissed her dreams of helping people. My son needs physical therapy, Joseph said suddenly, for his leg. The copays are $60 each. Session twice a week. That's almost $500 a month that we don't have. Harper looked up, surprised by the sudden personal revelation. I've watched him try to hide the pain because he knows we can't afford the treatments, Joseph continued. I've seen other families in the waiting room making the same impossible choices, treatment or rent, medicine or groceries. Your father might think helping people is bad business, but from where I'm sitting, not helping people is what's wrong with the system. Harper stared at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. You think I'm right about the foundation? I think, Joseph said carefully, that a person who sits alone in a hospital at 4 a.m. worrying about how to help strangers probably has her priorities straight, regardless of what anyone else thinks. Tears welled up in Harper's eyes again, but this time they seemed different, less desperate, more hopeful. I've been trying to get someone to take my ideas seriously for so long. The board listens politely, but they defer to Dad on everything. My mother thinks I should focus on more appropriate charitable work, like hospital galas and fundraising dinners. But you want to do more than throw parties for rich people. I want to do what my father did when he started. Save lives. Help families. Make healthcare accessible to everyone, not just people who can afford the best insurance. Harper's voice grew stronger as she spoke. I want Wilson Healthcare to mean something again, not just be another corporate giant that extracts profit from human suffering. Joseph found himself nodding. That's not naive, that's necessary. For the first time since he'd found her crying, Harper smiled, a real smile that transformed her entire face. You know, you're the first person who said that to me. Everyone else tells me I need to be more realistic, more practical. Maybe you just haven't been talking to the right people, Joseph said. The people who need what you're trying to build. We understand why it matters. Harper studied his face intently. Can I ask you something? Sure. If you could design a program to help families like yours, families dealing with medical debt and insurance gaps, what would it look like? Joseph paused, surprised by the question. No one had ever asked him what he thought the solution might. We only expected him to be grateful for whatever scraps of assistance were offered. I'd start with transparency, he said slowly. No surprise bills, no hidden costs. If my son needs surgery, I should know upfront exactly what it will cost and what my options are for paying it. He was quiet for a moment, thinking, and I'd have payment plans that actually work for working families. Not just pay 50% up front and figure out the rest, but real plans that take into account what people can actually afford. Harper pulled out her phone and started typing notes. What else? Emergency hardship funds. Sometimes families are one crisis away from losing everything. If there was a fund that could step in during those emergencies, cover costs, while people get back on their feet, it could prevent so much suffering. Harper nodded enthusiastically, her fingers flying across her phone screen. These are exactly the kinds of programs I've been proposing, real solutions for real problems. Joseph watched her take notes and felt something he hadn't experienced in months, hope. Not just for his own family, but for the possibility that someone with actual power might understand what families like his needed to survive. Over the following nights, Joseph found himself looking forward to the 10th floor in a way that surprised him. Harper had begun staying later into the early morning hours, and their conversations had evolved from chance encounters to something approaching routine. She would be waiting in the family lounge when he arrived, usually with her laptop open and papers scattered across the coffee table, working on proposals that her father would never see. It was Thursday night, technically Friday morning, when Joseph found Harper slumped over her computer, fast asleep. Her hair had fallen across her face, and her breathing was soft and even. Joseph stood in the doorway for a moment, debating whether to wake her or let her rest. The dark circles under her eyes had grown more pronounced each night, and he'd noticed the way her hands shook when she drank her coffee. Too much caffeine, too little sleep, too much stress. He decided to let her sleep and quietly began his cleaning routine, but as he moved around the room, Harper stirred, blinking in confusion before focusing on him. Joseph, what time is it? Almost 5, he said softly. I didn't want to wake you. You looked like you needed the rest. Harper sat up, wincing as her neck protested the awkward sleeping position. I must have dozed off. I was working on the budget projections for the mobile health units. She rubbed her eyes and looked around the room as if trying to remember where she was. When's the last time you went home? Joseph asked, noting the wrinkled state of her clothes, the same designer dress she'd been wearing 2 days ago. Harper's laugh was hollow. Home to what? An empty penthouse where I can pace around and worry about Dad in more expensive surroundings. She gestured toward the hallway. At least here I'm close to him. At least here I can pretend I'm doing something useful. Joseph paused in his dusting. You know the hospital has a family sleep room on this floor, right? With actual beds and showers? I tried that the first week, Harper said, stretching her cramped shoulders. But I kept having nightmares. At least out here, if something happens, I'll know right away. Joseph understood that fear, The terror of being absent during a crisis, of missing a final moment because you'd stepped away to take care of yourself. He'd spent those 3 days in the ICU with Sarah, sleeping in uncomfortable chairs, afraid to leave even for a few minutes. "Have you eaten anything today?" he asked. Harper looked genuinely confused by the question, as if eating was a concept she'd forgotten entirely. Maybe. There was a meeting with the lawyers yesterday afternoon, and someone ordered sandwiches." "Harper." Joseph's voice was gentle but firm. "You can't take care of your father if you don't take care of yourself." "I'm fine," she said automatically, but her stomach chose that moment to growl audibly, betraying her. Joseph made a decision. "Come with me." "What? Where?" "Staff break room. I bring dinner for my shift, but I always pack too much." It wasn't entirely true. Joseph's meals were carefully portioned to stretch his grocery budget, but Harper looked like she hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. Harper hesitated. "I shouldn't leave the floor. What if something happens? We'll be 2 minutes." "Away," Joseph said, "and you have your phone. The nurses know where to find you." Something in his tone must have convinced her, because Harper slowly gathered her papers and followed him down the hallway. The staff break room was small and utilitarian, nothing like the elegant family lounge, but it had a microwave, a refrigerator, and most importantly, privacy. Joseph opened his lunch bag and pulled out a container of homemade soup, one of the few meals he could make cheaply in large batches. "Mrs. Patterson made this," he said, not mentioning that he'd asked their neighbor for the recipe specifically because it was nutritious and inexpensive. "She's convinced I'm too skinny." Mrs. Patterson, our neighbor. "She watches Marcus during my overnight shifts." Joseph heated the soup in the microwave and found 2 clean bowls in the cabinet. "She's been a lifesaver since Marcus's accident. I don't know what we would have done without her." Harper accepted the bowl of soup gratefully, inhaling the steam. "It smells amazing. I can't remember the last time I had homemade anything." They sat at the small break room table, eating in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Joseph watched Harper take tentative sips that gradually became more enthusiastic as she realized how hungry she actually was. "This is really good," she said, looking up with surprise. "What's in it?" "Vegetables, chicken broth, some pasta. Nothing fancy, but it's filling and cheap to make." Joseph paused. "Mrs. Patterson taught me to cook after Sarah died, said Marcus needed more than frozen dinners and takeout." "She sounds wonderful." "She is. One of those people who sees a need and just fills it, without making a big deal about it." Joseph thought about his elderly neighbor, how she'd appeared at their door the day after Sarah's funeral with a casserole and an offer to help with Marcus whenever Joseph needed it. "She doesn't have much money, but she has the biggest heart of anyone I know." Harper set down her spoon, studying Joseph's face. "You talk about her the way I used to talk about my grandmother. She was the one who taught me about medicine, about helping people. She'd volunteer at free clinics on weekends, even after working all week as a nurse." "Is she still around?" "No, she passed when I was in college." Harper's voice grew wistful. "She's the one who would have understood what I'm trying to do with the foundation. She always said that medicine was about service, not profit." Joseph could see the grief in Harper's expression, not just for her grandmother, but for the loss of someone who would have supported her dreams. "She'd be proud of you now, fighting for these programs." "I hope so. Sometimes I wonder if I'm just tilting at windmills, you know? Everyone keeps telling me I'm being unrealistic, that business doesn't work the way I want it to." "Maybe business doesn't," Joseph said, "but people do, and at the end of the day, hospitals are supposed to serve people." Harper nodded, finishing the last of her soup. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "What made you trust me that first night when you found me crying? You could have just done your job and left me alone." Why did you stop? Joseph considered the question. You sounded like Marcus when he's trying not to let me see him hurt, like someone who was carrying too much weight alone. He paused. And I guess I know what it's like to feel like you're fighting a battle nobody else understands. The medical bills, the job search, the constant worry about providing for Marcus. Sometimes it feels like the whole system is designed to keep people like me from getting ahead, no matter how hard we work. Harper leaned forward intently. That's exactly what I'm trying to change. The system shouldn't punish people for getting sick or for not being born wealthy. But changing systems is hard work, Joseph said, especially when the people running them benefit from keeping things the way they are. So what do? Just accept it? Joseph shook his head. You find ways to help where you can. Mrs. Patterson helps by watching Marcus. I help by working overnight so we have insurance. Small actions, but they matter. And I could help by funding programs that make healthcare accessible, Harper said, understanding dawning in her voice. You could, but first you have to survive long enough to make it happen. Joseph gestured toward her empty bowl. Which means eating regularly and getting some real sleep. Harper smiled. The first genuinely relaxed smile he'd seen from her. Is this what having a friend feels like? Someone who makes sure you eat soup and tells you uncomfortable truths. The word friend hit Joseph unexpectedly. He hadn't had a real friend since Sarah died. His world had narrowed to work, and Marcus, survival and responsibility. But sitting here with Harper, sharing soup and honest conversation, he realized how much he'd missed having someone to talk to who understood struggle without judgment. I think it might be, he said. Though I've been out of practice for a while. Me too, Harper admitted. Most people want to be my friend because of who my father is, what connections I might provide. It's been a long time since someone just saw me. They sat in comfortable silence. Two people who'd found an unexpected connection in the fluorescent-lit break room of a hospital at 5 a.m. Outside, the city was beginning to wake up. But in this small space, they'd created something rare, genuine, understanding between two very different lives. I should get back to my rounds, Joseph said eventually, though he was reluctant to break the moment. And I should check on Dad, Harper said. But she made no move to leave. Finally, Joseph stood and began clearing their bowls. Same time tomorrow night? Harper's smile was warm and grateful. I'll try to have eaten something by then. And maybe gotten some actual sleep. Don't push your luck, Harper said, but her tone was teasing rather than defensive. As they walked back toward the family lounge, Joseph realized that for the first time since Marcus's accident, he felt less alone in the world. And judging by the way Harper's shoulders had relaxed, by the first genuine laughter he'd heard from her, he suspected she felt the same way. The following Tuesday brought an unexpected crisis. Joseph was halfway through his shift when his phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Patterson. Marcus has fever of 102, taking him to urgent care now. Don't panic, but thought you should know. Joseph's blood ran cold. Marcus hadn't been seriously ill since the leg injury, and the timing couldn't be worse. Joseph was scheduled to work until 6 a.m., and urgent care visits weren't covered by their insurance at the same rate as primary care appointments. Another unexpected medical bill they couldn't afford. He was standing frozen in the corridor, staring at his phone, when Harper appeared beside him. She'd taken to walking the halls during her sleepless nights and had developed an uncanny ability to sense when something was wrong. Joseph, what is it? My son, he said, his voice tight with worry. He's sick. High fever. My neighbor took him to urgent care, but I can't leave work and I can't afford. He stopped, realizing he was rambling. Harper didn't hesitate. Which urgent care center? East Side Medical, but Harper, I can't. You can't what? Be worried about your son? Harper was already pulling out her phone. I'm calling them now. You Don't understand. The insurance, the copays I can't pay for. Harper held up a hand to silence him as someone answered her call. Hello, this is Harper Wilson. You have a patient there, Marcus Davis, who was brought in tonight with a fever. I need to speak with the attending physician. Yes, I'll hold. Joseph stared at her. Harper, what are you doing? What any friend would do, she said matter-of-factly. Hello, doctor. Yes, this is Harper Wilson from Wilson Healthcare Systems. I'm calling about Marcus Davis. No, I'm not family, but I'm authorized to discuss his case on behalf of his father, who is currently at work. She covered the phone and whispered to Joseph, Is that okay? Can I talk to them for you? Joseph nodded, too stunned and worried to argue. Right, yes, I understand. A viral infection, probably flu, and the treatment plan. I see. And what's the expected cost for tonight's visit? Harper's eyebrows rose slightly. Put all charges on the Wilson Foundation account. Authorization. Code 7749 Alpha. Yes, that's correct. Full coverage. No, Dr. Matthews, this is legitimate. The patient is covered under our emergency assistance program. Thank you. She hung up and turned to Joseph, who was staring at her in shock. Viral infection, probably flu, she reported calmly. There, giving him IV fluids and fever reducers. Mrs. Patterson can take him home in about an hour, and he should be fine in a few days with rest. No charge for tonight's visit. Harper, Joseph said slowly, what did you just do? What did you just do? I used my father's foundation account to cover Marcus's medical expenses, she said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. It's exactly the kind of emergency assistance the foundation is supposed to provide. But your father is unconscious and can't object, Harper said firmly. And even if he were awake, this is precisely what the foundation money should be used for. A working father shouldn't have to choose between his job and his sick son. Joseph felt his knees go weak with relief. The urgent care visit that would have cost them at least $400, money they absolutely didn't have, was now covered. Marcus would get the care he needed without putting them deeper into debt. I don't know how to thank you, he said. You don't need to thank me. You need to call Mrs. Patterson and let her know everything's okay, Harper smiled. And tomorrow night, you're going to tell me more about Marcus. I want to know about this young man who's lucky enough to have you for a father. The next evening, Joseph brought something he'd never brought to work before. Photos of Marcus. He found Harper in their usual spot, but tonight she wasn't alone. She was video chatting with someone on her laptop, and Joseph could hear a young woman's voice coming through the speakers. And then Professor Williams said my thesis proposal was surprisingly insightful, which I think was supposed to be a compliment. The voice was animated, clearly excited about something. It was definitely a compliment, Harper said, laughing. Professor Williams doesn't give out praise lightly. I'm so proud of you, Chloe. Joseph hesitated in the doorway, not wanting to interrupt, but Harper spotted him and waved him over. Chloe, I want you to meet my friend Joseph. Joseph, this is my cousin Chloe. She's finishing her senior year at Northwestern, pre-med. A young woman with Harper's dark hair and bright eyes appeared on the screen. Hi, Joseph. Harper's told me about you. How's your son feeling? Joseph was surprised that Harper had mentioned him to her family. Much better, thank you. The fever broke yesterday, and he's back to his normal self. That's wonderful, Chloe said genuinely. Harper said he's been through a lot with his leg injury. That must have been scary. It was, Joseph admitted, settling into a chair beside Harper. But he's incredibly resilient, stronger than I am most days. Harper showed me some of the foundation proposals you two have been working on, Chloe continued. The sliding scale payment program sounds amazing. I've been working at a free clinic here in Chicago, and we see so many families who fall into that gap. Too much income for assistance, not enough for private insurance. Joseph looked at Harper with surprise. You've been working on the proposals? Harper's cheeks colored slightly. I incorporated some of the ideas we discussed: the emergency hardship fund, the transparent pricing, the payment plans that actually work for families. I hope that's okay. More than okay, Joseph said, touched that. She'd taken their conversations seriously enough to turn them into formal proposals. Chloe's going to help us pilot some of the programs, Harper explained. She's doing her senior research project on healthcare accessibility in underserved communities. I graduate in 2 months, Chloe said from the screen. I was planning to take a gap year before medical school to get more clinical experience. Harper suggested I could spend that year helping launch the new foundation programs. Joseph could see the family resemblance now, not just in their features, but in their shared passion for helping others. That sounds like incredible experience. And she'd be working with people who actually understand what patients need, Harper added, glancing meaningfully at Joseph, not just pushing papers around a boardroom. They talked for another hour, with Chloe asking thoughtful questions about Joseph's experiences navigating the healthcare system, and Harper taking notes on everything. Joseph found himself opening up about the frustrations and humiliations he'd faced. The billing departments that acted like payment plans were personal favors, the insurance representatives who seemed determined to deny every claim, the doctors who rushed through appointments because they were behind schedule. The worst part, Joseph found himself saying, is feeling like you're begging for something you've already paid for. We have insurance, we pay premiums every month, but when Marcus needed surgery, it still felt like we were asking for charity. Chloe nodded vigorously. That's exactly what the families at our clinic say. They feel like the system is designed to make them feel ashamed for needing help. Because it is, Harper said quietly. The bureaucracy, the complicated forms, the endless hoops to jump through, it's all designed to discourage people from accessing care they're entitled to. When Chloe finally signed off to study for her finals, Harper and Joseph sat in comfortable silence for a moment. She seems wonderful, Joseph said finally. She is. She reminds me of myself at that age, before I got cynical about changing the system. Harper smiled fondly. She still believes we can fix things. You still believe that too, Joseph pointed out. Otherwise, you wouldn't be working on these proposals at 2 a.m. Harper considered this. Maybe, but having Chloe involved and having your perspective, it makes it feel possible instead of just idealistic. Joseph pulled out his phone and showed Harper the photos he'd brought. These are from Marcus's birthday last month. Mrs. Patterson threw him a little party. The photos showed a lanky teenager with Joseph's serious eyes and a shy smile, surrounded by a modest celebration in Mrs. Patterson's small apartment. There was a homemade cake, a few wrapped presents, and most importantly, Marcus laughing at something the elderly woman had said. He looks happy, Harper observed. He is, mostly. He's learned to find joy in small things. Joseph swiped to another photo. This one's from his physical therapy graduation day. He'd worked so hard to regain full mobility. In the photo, Marcus stood proudly next to his physical therapist, holding a certificate of completion. His smile was radiant, and Joseph remembered how proud he'd felt watching his son overcome something so challenging. He has your determination, Harper said softly. And his mother's optimism, Joseph replied. Even when things look impossible, he finds reasons to hope. Harper studied the photos for a long moment. I'd like to meet him sometime, if that would be okay. Joseph looked at her with surprise. In all the years since Sarah's death, he'd kept his work life and his home life strictly separate. Marcus knew about Joseph's job, but had never met any of his co-workers. The idea of introducing Harper to his son felt significant, like crossing a line from acquaintance to genuine friendship. I think he'd like that, Joseph said finally. He's been asking about why I seem happier lately. I told him I'd made a friend at work. Just a friend? Harper teased gently. Joseph smiled. A very good friend. The tranquil rhythm of their late-night conversations shattered on a cold Thursday morning when Joseph arrived at the hospital to find the 10th floor buzzing with unusual activity. 3 men in expensive suits stood outside Richard Wilson's room, speaking in hushed tones with Dr. Matthews, the attending physician. Their body language was aggressive, territorial, and Joseph immediately recognized the type, corporate executives who were used to getting their way through intimidation and money. Harper was nowhere to be seen, which struck Joseph as odd. For the past 3 weeks, she'd been a constant presence on the floor, rarely leaving, except for brief trips home to shower and change clothes. Joseph continued his cleaning routine, but he kept one eye on the cluster of suits, his instincts telling him that something was very wrong. 20 minutes later, Harper emerged from the elevator, and Joseph could see trouble written across her face. Her usual composed demeanor was replaced by barely controlled anger, her jaw tight and her hands clenched into fists. She strode directly toward the group of men, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. "Uncle Charles," she said, her voice carrying clearly down the hallway. "I wasn't expecting you." The tallest of the 3 men turned toward her, and Joseph could see the family resemblance immediately, the same aristocratic features. But where Harper's face usually held warmth and compassion, this man's expression was cold and calculating. "Harper," Charles Wilson replied, his tone formal and dismissive. "We need to discuss the situation." What situation would that be? Harper's voice was deceptively calm, but Joseph could hear the steel underneath. "Your father's condition has been stable for 3 weeks, with no signs of improvement," another man interjected. He was shorter than Charles, with the soft look of someone who'd spent his career behind a desk. "The board is concerned about the leadership vacuum at Wilson Healthcare. Decisions need to be made." Joseph moved closer, pretending to dust a nearby table while straining to hear the conversation. "My father is still alive," Harper said firmly, "and I'm perfectly capable of handling day-to-day operations until he recovers." Charles Wilson's laugh was harsh and condescending. "You're 25 years old with no real business experience. Outside of your pet charity projects, the board has voted to appoint interim leadership until Richard either recovers or—" He left the sentence hanging. "Or until you have him declared incompetent," Harper finished, her voice rising slightly. "Is that what this is about? You couldn't wait for him to wake up. This is about protecting the company our family built," the 3rd man said. Joseph recognized him now, Robert Thompson, Wilson Healthcare's CFO, whose photo had been in the business pages regularly over the past few years. "Your father's medical expenses alone are costing the company thousands of dollars per day. The board has legitimate concerns about fiscal responsibility." Harper's face went white. "You're talking about pulling his life support for financial reasons." "We're talking about making practical decisions," Charles replied. "Richard has been unconscious for 3 weeks. The neurologists say there's less than a 20% chance of meaningful recovery. Meanwhile, Wilson Healthcare stock has dropped 12% since news of his condition became public." Joseph felt his stomach clench. These men were discussing ending Richard Wilson's life as if it were a quarterly budget decision. He thought about Harper, sitting vigil night after night, fighting for programs to help families like his, and now having to fight for her own father's life against his own brother. "The board meeting is scheduled for Monday," Thompson continued. "We'll be voting on interim leadership and other matters." "What other matters?" Harper demanded. Charles and Thompson exchanged a look that made Joseph's blood run cold. "The foundation. Programs you've been proposing," Charles said with obvious distaste. "The board has reviewed your latest submissions, and we've determined they're not in the company's best interests. Too much financial risk, too little return on investment." "Those programs could help thousands of people," Harper said, her voice shaking with fury. "Those programs could bankrupt us if implemented on the scale you're suggesting," Thompson replied. "The board has decided to suspend all Foundation operations, pending a full financial review." Joseph watched Harper's face crumble, as months of work, of hope, of planning for a better future were dismissed with a few casual sentences. But then her expression hardened, and Joseph saw something fierce and determined flash in her eyes. "You can't do this," she said quietly. "Dad may be unconscious, but he's still the majority shareholder. He's still the CEO." "Actually," Charles said with a cruel smile, "we can. Richard signed power of attorney documents 5 years ago, when he had his first minor heart episode. In the event of his incapacitation, decision-making authority falls to the board of directors." Harper staggered slightly, as if she'd been physically struck. "He never told me about any power of attorney." "Why would he? You were in college playing with your medical degree that you never intended to use. Richard was planning for real contingencies, not your idealistic fantasies about turning Wilson Healthcare into a charity." The contempt in Charles's voice was palpable, and Joseph found himself taking a step forward without conscious thought. He caught himself and forced himself to remain in place, but his hands were clenched around his mop handle hard enough to make his knuckles ache. "There's more," Thompson said, pulling out a manila folder. "We've been reviewing recent Foundation expenditures, and we've found some irregularities." Harper's face went pale. "What kind of irregularities?" "Unauthorized payments to individuals not covered under our assistance programs. Medical bills paid without proper documentation or approval. Essentially, you've been using Foundation funds as your personal charity account." Joseph's heart stopped. They were talking about Marcus's urgent care visit, the bill that Harper had covered without hesitation. She'd said it was exactly what the Foundation was supposed to do, but apparently her uncle and the board disagreed. "Those were legitimate emergency assistance payments," Harper said, but her voice lacked its earlier conviction. "Without board approval, without proper documentation, without following established protocols." Charles ticked off the violations on his fingers. "That's embezzlement, Harper, theft of corporate funds." "It was helping people who needed help," Harper said desperately. "It was using the Foundation for its intended purpose. Its intended purpose is to provide tax benefits for Wilson Healthcare while maintaining our corporate image," Thompson said bluntly. "Not to fund your personal crusade, to save the world." Joseph felt sick. Harper had risked everything to help his family, and now she was being threatened with criminal charges for an act of kindness. "The board is prepared to overlook these indiscretions," Charles continued, "provided you agree to step back from any involvement in company operations. Focus on your art classes, your charity galas, the kinds of activities appropriate for someone in your position. And if I don't agree, then we'll be forced to pursue legal action for misuse of corporate funds. A criminal investigation, possible. Charges. Definitely a public scandal that would destroy any credibility you might have in this industry." Harper stood frozen, trapped between impossible choices. Joseph could see her weighing her options, calculating the cost of fighting versus the cost of surrendering. "You have until Monday to decide," Charles said, checking his expensive watch. "The board meeting is at 9 a.m. We expect your resignation letter on the table, along with a commitment to cease all involvement in Wilson Healthcare operations." So, 3 men walked away, leaving Harper standing alone in the hallway. Joseph watched her shoulders shake as the full weight of their threats settled over her. Everything she'd worked for, everything she'd dreamed of accomplishing, had just been ripped away by men who saw compassion as a corporate liability. Joseph abandoned his cleaning cart and approached her carefully. "Harper," she turned toward him, and he could see tears streaming down her face. "They're going to let him die," she whispered, "and they're going to destroy everything I've tried to build." "We won't let them," Joseph said firmly, surprising himself. with the conviction in his voice. Harper looked at him with desperate hope. We? Joseph thought about Marcus's fever breaking because Harper had ensured he got proper medical care. He thought about all the families who could benefit from the programs Harper had designed. He thought about men in expensive suits deciding that human lives were acceptable casualties in pursuit of profit margins. We, he confirmed, you're not fighting this alone anymore. The rest of Joseph's shift passed in a blur of anxious energy and mounting determination. Harper had retreated to her father's room after the confrontation, and Joseph hadn't seen her since, but her uncle's words echoed in his mind with increasing urgency. Embezzlement charges, criminal investigation, public scandal. Harper had risked everything to help Marcus, and now she was facing potential prison time for an act of compassion. By the time Joseph's replacement arrived at 6 a.m., he'd made a decision that would have seemed impossible just a few hours earlier. Instead of going home to sleep, he drove directly to Millbrook Heights Elementary School, where he knew he'd find Marcus getting ready for another day of classes. Mrs. Patterson was walking Marcus to the school entrance when Joseph pulled up to the curb. His son's face lit up with surprise and concern when he saw his father's car. "Dad, what are you doing here? Is everything okay?" Joseph got out of the car, suddenly aware of how he must look. Exhausted from his overnight shift, still wearing his hospital scrubs, with the kind of intense expression that usually meant crisis or bad news. "Everything's going to be okay," Joseph said, pulling Marcus into a tight hug. "But I need to tell you something important, and I need your help." Mrs. Patterson stepped forward, her weathered face creased with worry. "Joseph, what's happened?" "The friend I told you about, the one from work, her name is Harper, and she's in serious trouble because she helped us when Marcus was sick." Marcus looked confused. "What kind of trouble?" Joseph knelt down so he was at eye level with his son. "Do you remember when you had that high fever last week and Mrs. Patterson took you to urgent care?" Marcus nodded. "The bill for that visit was going to be almost $400, money we didn't have. Harper used her family's foundation to pay for it so you could get the treatment you needed without us going deeper into debt." Understanding dawned in Marcus's eyes. "She helped us. She helped us," Joseph confirmed, "but now her family is saying she stole money from the company. They're threatening to have her arrested unless she gives up everything she's been working for, programs that could help thousands of families like ours." Mrs. Patterson made a soft sound of distress. "Oh, that poor girl, all for trying to do the right thing." "What can we do?" Marcus asked, his young face serious with concern. Joseph felt a surge of pride at his son's immediate willingness to help someone who had helped them. "I'm not sure yet, but I know we can't let her face this alone. She's been fighting for families, like ours, and now we need to fight for her." Marcus was quiet for a moment, processing this information with the gravity that had become his default since the accident. "Dad, are you going to get in trouble too, for being her friend?" The question hit Joseph like a physical blow. He thought about Randy Coleman, about the custodial job that provided their health insurance, about the precarious financial situation that made him expendable to his employers. If he got involved in Harper's fight against Wilson Healthcare's board, he could lose everything they'd struggled to maintain. "I might," he said honestly, "but sometimes you have to take risks for the people you care about." Marcus reached out and took his father's hand. "Like Mom would have done. Mom would have done." Joseph's throat tightened. "Yeah, like Mom would have done." Mrs. Patterson stepped closer, her voice firm despite her age. "What do you need from us, Joseph?" The simple question, asked without hesitation or qualification, reminded Joseph why he'd been able to survive these past difficult years. People like Mrs. Patterson and Harper, people who saw need and responded with action rather than excuses. "I need to understand exactly what Harper is up against," Joseph said, "and I need to figure out how to help her without making things worse." "Then you'd better get some sleep first." Mrs. Patterson said practically. Can't fight battles when you're dead on your feet. Marcus can stay with me after school until you wake up. Joseph wanted to protest, to insist he was fine, but exhaustion was beginning to catch up with him. He'd been running on adrenaline and worry for hours, and Mrs. Patterson was right. He couldn't help Harper if he collapsed from exhaustion. Just a few hours, he agreed. That afternoon, Joseph woke to the sound of voices in Mrs. Patterson's apartment next door. Through the thin walls, he could hear Marcus explaining something in his earnest, careful way. Joseph checked his phone. 3:30 p.m. He'd slept for nearly 8 hours, longer than he'd slept in months. He found Marcus and Mrs. Patterson at her kitchen table, surrounded by printed articles and handwritten notes. Marcus looked up when Joseph entered. "Dad, we've been researching," Marcus said, pointing to the papers spread across the table. "Mrs. Patterson helped me print out articles about Wilson Healthcare and Harper's family." Mrs. Patterson poured Joseph a cup of coffee and gestured for him to sit down. "That girl is in more trouble than you might realize, Joseph. Her uncle Charles has been trying to push her out of the company for years." Joseph accepted the coffee gratefully and examined the articles Marcus had found. Business journal pieces about Wilson Healthcare's expansion, profiles of Richard Wilson, financial reports showing the company's growing profits alongside decreasing charitable contributions. "Look at this," Marcus said, pointing to an article from 2 years ago. "Harper's been trying to get the board to approve these foundation programs since she graduated college. But every time she proposes something, her uncle blocks it." Joseph read the article, which featured a photo of Harper at a medical conference, presenting research on healthcare accessibility in underserved communities. She looked younger, more hopeful, less worn down by corporate politics and family conflict. "And look at this," Mrs. Patterson added, showing Joseph another article. "Charles Wilson has been buying up shares in the company for the past 3 years. He's trying to gain enough control to oust his brother and take over as CEO." Joseph felt the pieces clicking together. Richard's heart attack gave him the opportunity he's been waiting for. "Exactly," Marcus said. "If Harper's dad doesn't wake up, or if they declare him incompetent, Charles becomes the majority shareholder. He can do whatever he wants with the company." Joseph stared at the evidence spread across Mrs. Patterson's table. Harper wasn't just fighting for her foundation programs. She was fighting for her father's life and legacy against a man who'd been planning this takeover for years. "There's something else," Mrs. Patterson said quietly. "I called my friend Dorothy, who works in billing at Metropolitan General. She says Charles Wilson has been meeting with the hospital's finance committee, discussing Richard's care costs." Joseph's blood ran cold. "He's pressuring them to recommend ending life support." "Dorothy thinks so. She says the committee is scheduled to review Richard's case next week, right after the board meeting." Marcus looked between the adults, his young face troubled. "So if Harper doesn't give up on Monday, they'll have her arrested. But if she does give up, they'll let her dad die anyway." "That's about the size of it," Mrs. Patterson said grimly. Joseph stood up, pacing to the window. Outside, the afternoon sun was shining on a world that seemed oblivious to the life and death struggle happening within the walls of Metropolitan General Hospital. Somewhere across town, Harper was probably sitting alone in that family lounge, weighing impossible choices while her father lay unconscious, unaware that his own brother was plotting to end his life for profit. "We have to do something," Joseph said, turning back to Mrs. Patterson and Marcus. "What can we do?" Marcus asked. "We're not rich or powerful like them." Joseph thought about that, about power and money and influence. Harper had all of those things, at least in theory, but they weren't helping her now. Her own family was using their resources against her, trapping her with legal threats and corporate maneuvering. But Joseph had something different. He had relationships built on genuine care rather than financial interest. He had Mrs. Patterson, who helped because helping was the right thing to do. He had Marcus, who was willing to fight for someone who had shown them kindness. He had co-workers at the hospital who saw him as a person, not just a cleaning crew member. "Maybe we don't need to be rich or powerful," Joseph said slowly. "Maybe we just need to be right." Mrs. Patterson smiled. "Now you're talking sense. What do you have in mind?" Joseph looked at the articles again, at the photos of Harper presenting her research, at the financial reports showing Wilson Healthcare's record profits alongside their declining charitable contributions. "I think," he said, "it's time people knew the truth about what's really happening at Wilson Healthcare, and I think Harper needs to know she's not fighting this battle alone." Marcus grinned, the first genuinely happy expression Joseph had seen from his son in weeks. "Are we going to help her win?" Joseph thought about Sarah, about the promises he'd made at her bedside, about the kind of man he wanted to be for his son. He thought about Harper, crying alone in a hospital lounge because she dared to believe that healthcare should serve people instead of profit margins. "We're going to try," he said. "We're definitely going to try." Monday morning arrived grey and cold, with the kind of bitter wind that made people hunch their shoulders and walk faster than necessary. Joseph stood outside the Wilson Healthcare System's headquarters at 8:30 a.m., wearing his only suit, the one he'd bought for job interviews that never led anywhere. Beside him, Marcus fidgeted nervously in his best school clothes, while Mrs. Patterson checked her watch for the third time in 5 minutes. "You sure about this?" Mrs. Patterson asked quietly. Joseph looked up at the gleaming glass tower that housed one of the most powerful healthcare companies in the state. Somewhere inside, Harper was probably preparing to walk into a boardroom where her own family would force her to choose between her freedom and her father's life. "No," Joseph admitted, "but I'm sure about her." They weren't alone on the sidewalk. Over the weekend, word had spread through networks that Joseph hadn't even known existed. Mrs. Patterson had called her church, where several families had been. Helped by Wilson Healthcare's foundation programs over the years, Marcus had reached out to classmates whose parents worked at Metropolitan General. Joseph had contacted his co-workers, including Randy Coleman, who'd surprised everyone by taking a personal day to be there. The crowd wasn't large, maybe 40 people, but they represented something that Charles Wilson and his board hadn't anticipated. The faces behind the statistics Harper had been fighting for. Maria Santos stood near the building entrance, holding a sign that read, "Wilson Healthcare saved my daughter's life." Her 10-year-old daughter Isabella had received emergency surgery through the Foundation's assistance program 2 years ago, before Charles had started restricting eligibility requirements. Randy Coleman had brought 3 other night shift employees from the hospital, all of whom had stories about patients who'd been turned away or families crushed by medical debt. They'd worked together to create a simple banner: "Healthcare should heal, not harm." But the most powerful presence was Chloe, Wilson, Harper's cousin, who had driven down from Northwestern University with a van full of pre-med students. She'd been in contact with Harper over the weekend, and her face was set with grim determination. "Uncle Charles doesn't know I'm here," Chloe had told Joseph when she arrived. "Harper asked me to stay away, said it would just make things worse for me with the family, but some things are more important than family politics." At 8:45, Joseph's phone buzzed with a text from Harper. "Don't do this. You'll only make Charles angrier, and I can't protect you from the fallout." Joseph showed the message to Mrs. Patterson, who snorted dismissively. "That girl still doesn't understand. We're not here for her to protect us. We're here to protect her." At exactly 9 a.m., the small crowd moved toward the building entrance. Joseph had expected security guards, locked doors, corporate stonewalling. Instead, they found the lobby filled with news cameras and reporters. Someone, Joseph suspected Chloe, had tipped off the media about the board meeting and the controversy. surrounding Harper's foundation programs. A young reporter approached Joseph as they entered the building. "Are you here to support Harper Wilson?" "We're here to support the programs she's been fighting for," Joseph corrected. "Programs that help families get health care when they need it most, not just when they can afford it." The reporter scribbled notes quickly. "And you are?" "Joseph Davis. My son and I have been helped by the Wilson Foundation's Emergency Assistance Program. Without it, we'd probably be homeless right now. Marcus stepped forward, his young voice clear and strong. "Harper Wilson helped my dad help me when I was sick. She didn't ask for anything in return. She just saw that we needed help, and she helped." The reporter's eyes lit up. A teenager defending the embattled heiress made for compelling television. More cameras turned toward Marcus, who handled the attention with remarkable composure. "What do you want people to know about Harper Wilson?" the reporter asked. Marcus looked directly into the camera. "I want them to know that she cares more about helping people than about being rich or powerful. And I want them to know that families like mine are counting on her to keep fighting, even when it's hard." Joseph felt his chest swell with pride. His son, who'd learned to carry burdens too heavy for his age, was using his voice to defend someone who'd shown them kindness. Upstairs, the boardroom meeting was scheduled to begin in 15 minutes. Joseph and the others crowded into the elevator, riding up to the executive floor in tense silence. When the doors opened, they found themselves face to face with Charles Wilson himself. Harper's uncle looked exactly as Joseph remembered from the hospital, tall, cold, and supremely confident in his own authority. But his expression shifted to surprise and then anger as he saw the crowd of people emerging from the elevator. "What is this?" Charles demanded. "These are the people your foundation is supposed to serve," Chloe said, stepping forward to face her uncle. "The families Harper has been fighting for." Charles's gaze swept over the assembled group. Working-class families, hospital employees, elderly neighbors, college students, and his lip curled with disdain. "Security already called the press," Chloe said calmly. "They're broadcasting. Live from downstairs. Want to explain to the cameras why you're having families with sick loved ones escorted out of your building." Through the glass walls of the boardroom, Joseph could see Harper sitting alone at one end of a long conference table. She looked pale and exhausted, wearing a severe black suit that made her seem smaller and more vulnerable than ever. When she saw the crowd in the hallway, her eyes widened in shock and something that might have been hope. Charles Wilson was clearly calculating, weighing his options. The presence of cameras downstairs complicated things. Having families arrested for supporting Harper would make terrible optics for Wilson Healthcare. "5 minutes, he said finally. "Then you leave voluntarily or security will escort you out." Joseph stepped forward, his hands shaking slightly, but his voice steady. "Mr. Wilson, my name is Joseph Davis. Your niece used foundation funds to pay for my son's emergency medical care 3 weeks ago. She didn't ask permission, didn't fill out forms, didn't wait for approval. She just saw a family in crisis and helped." Charles's expression hardened. "She violated company policy and potentially broke the law." "She saved my family from bankruptcy," Joseph replied, "and she did it because she believes Wilson Healthcare should be about helping people, not just making money." Maria Santos stepped forward next. "My daughter Isabella had emergency surgery 2 years ago. The foundation paid for it when our insurance fell through. Harper personally called to make sure Isabella got the follow-up care she needed." One by one, the families shared their stories. Emergency assistance that prevented homelessness. Medical bills covered when insurance companies found technicalities to deny claims. Foundation programs that had literally saved lives. Through the glass, Joseph could see Harper listening to every word, tears streaming down her face. The board members looked increasingly uncomfortable as the human cost of their financial decisions became impossible to ignore. Charles Wilson's face grew darker with each story. "Enough," he said finally. "These anecdotes don't change the fact that Harper misused company funds without authorization." "Actually," Chloe said, pulling out her phone, "they change everything." She held up the device, showing a video call in progress. On the screen was a familiar face, Richard Wilson, Harper's father, sitting up in his hospital bed with a tired but alert expression. "Hello, Charles," Richard Wilson said, his voice weak but clear. "I think we need to talk." The silence in the hallway was absolute. Charles Wilson's face went through several emotions: shock, fear, and finally, rage. "How long have you been awake?" Charles demanded. "Long enough," Richard replied. "Long enough to hear about your plans for my company, my foundation, and my daughter. And long enough to make some decisions of my own." Harper's gasp was audible even through the glass. She was staring at her father's face on Chloe's phone with desperate hope and disbelief. "The board meeting is cancelled," Richard Wilson continued. "Effective immediately, I'm resuming my duties as CEO. Charles, you're terminated, along with anyone else who participated in this attempted coup. And Harper," his voice softened, "I owe you an apology and a conversation about the foundation programs you've been developing. It seems I've been asleep in more ways than one." Charles Wilson looked like a man watching his life's ambitions crumble in real time. "You can't do this, Richard. You've been unconscious for weeks. The doctor said I might not wake up." Richard interrupted. "They never said I wouldn't. And now that I'm awake, I intend to make some changes around here. Starting with making sure my daughter gets the support she deserves." Joseph watched Harper's face transform as she processed what was happening. Her father was alive, awake, and finally ready to listen to the ideas she'd been fighting for. The foundation programs would survive. The families, depending on Wilson Healthcare's compassion, would continue to receive help. But more than that, Harper was no longer alone in her fight. She had her father's support, her cousin's loyalty, and an entire community of people who believed in what she was trying to accomplish. As the crowd began to disperse, Joseph caught Harper's eye through the glass. She mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." Joseph smiled and nodded. They'd done it, not through wealth or corporate maneuvering, but through the simple power of people standing together for what was right. 6 months later, Joseph stood in the lobby of the newly opened Wilson Community Health Center in Millbrook Heights, watching Marcus help elderly patients navigate the check-in process. The building had once been an abandoned warehouse in one of the city's poorest neighborhoods, but Harper had transformed it into something that felt more like a welcoming community center than a traditional medical facility. The walls were painted in warm, soothing colors that Chloe had helped choose during her gap year working with the foundation. Comfortable seating areas were scattered throughout the space, along with a play area for young ones and a quiet reading corner stocked with books in multiple languages. Most importantly, there were no intimidating administrative barriers, just friendly faces ready to help families access the care they needed. Mr. Davis called out Dr. Elena Martinez, the center's lead physician, as she approached with a clipboard and a warm smile. She was one of several doctors who had left high-paying positions at private practices to work with Harper's expanding foundation programs. "How's our volunteer coordinator settling in?" Joseph looked over at Marcus, who was patiently explaining the center's services to a worried-looking mother with 2 small youngsters clinging to her legs. At 15 now, Marcus had grown several inches and gained confidence that made him seem even taller. His physical therapy had been so successful that he'd been able to join his school's debate team, where he'd discovered a talent for public speaking that served him well in his volunteer work. "He's in his element," Joseph replied proudly. "I think he's found his calling." It was true. Marcus had started volunteering at the health center 2 months ago, initially just helping with filing and basic administrative tasks. But his natural empathy and ability to connect with families in crisis had quickly made him invaluable. Harper had created a formal youth ambassador program, with Marcus as the first participant, designed to train teenagers from the community to help bridge the gap between medical providers and the families they served. "Your son has a gift," Dr. Martinez observed. "He makes people feel seen and heard. That's not something you can teach." Joseph nodded, thinking about all the ways Marcus had grown since that terrible night when his fever had brought Harper into their lives. The boy who had once worried about being a burden to his father had become someone who actively sought out ways to help others carry their burdens. "Joseph," Harper's voice carried across the lobby as she emerged from a meeting room, followed by a group of people in business attire who looked nothing like the typical Wilson Healthcare board members. These were community leaders, social workers, and representatives from local organizations, the kind of people Harper now consulted when making decisions about foundation programs. She approached with the quick, energetic stride that had replaced her old, careful, uncertain movements. 6 months of having her father's full support and the freedom to implement her vision had transformed Harper from a hesitant idealist into a confident leader. "How did the meeting go?" Joseph asked. "Better than I hoped," Harper said, her eyes bright with excitement. "The City Council approved our proposal for the mobile health units. We'll have 3 vans operating by the end of the year, providing services to rural communities and neighborhoods without easy access to medical care." Joseph smiled. The mobile health units had been one of Harper's original ideas, something she'd proposed to her father's board years ago, only to be dismissed as impractical and expensive. Now, with community input and careful planning, they were becoming reality. "And," Harper continued, "Mrs. Patterson's suggestion about the pharmacy program was approved unanimously. We'll be able to provide prescription medications at cost to families who can't afford them through traditional insurance." Mrs. Patterson had become something of a legend in the Foundation's planning meetings. Her decades of experience helping neighbors through medical crises had given her insights that no MBA program could provide. Harper had formalized her role as a community wisdom advisor, a position that came with a modest salary and the kind of respect for practical experience that had been missing from Wilson Healthcare's previous approach. "Speaking of Mrs. Patterson," Harper added, "she wanted me to remind you about dinner Sunday. She's making that chicken dish Marcus likes." Joseph chuckled. The weekly family dinners at Mrs. Patterson's apartment had become a cherished tradition. What had started as neighbors helping each other through difficult times had evolved into something deeper, a chosen family bound together by shared struggles and mutual care. "We'll be there," Joseph confirmed. "Though I should warn you, Marcus has been practicing his presentation about the Youth Ambassador program. He's going to want to recruit more volunteers." "Good," Harper said firmly. "We need more young people involved in this work. They see things we adults miss." It was a sentiment that Richard Wilson had embraced as well, much to everyone's surprise. Harper's father had returned to work gradually, splitting his time between recovering his strength and learning about the foundation programs his daughter had developed during his absence. The man who had once dismissed Harper's ideas as naive, idealism now spoke passionately about the need for healthcare systems to serve communities rather than just shareholders. "Dad wants to expand the model to other cities," Harper had told Joseph just last week. "He thinks we can create a network of community health centers that actually respond to what families need instead of what insurance companies will pay for." The transformation hadn't been without challenges. Charles Wilson had contested his termination, leading to months of legal battles that had ultimately vindicated Richard's decision. Several board members had resigned rather than support the foundation's expanded mission, but they'd been replaced by people who understood that sustainable healthcare meant serving all members of the community. Most surprisingly, Wilson Healthcare's stock price had actually increased as news of their community programs spread. Investors, it turned out, were increasingly interested in companies that demonstrated genuine social responsibility rather than just paying lip service to corporate citizenship. "Joseph," Harper said now, lowering her voice slightly, "I have something I want to discuss with you." They walked toward Harper's office, passing examination rooms where families were receiving care without worrying about insurance pre-authorizations or surprise billing. The sounds were different here than in traditional medical facilities. Less hushed anxiety, more conversation, and even occasional laughter. Harper's office was modest compared to the executive spaces at Wilson Healthcare headquarters, but it reflected her priorities. The walls were covered with photos from community health fairs, thank you letters from families, and charts tracking the foundation's impact. Her desk was typically cluttered with grant applications, program proposals, and reports from the various health centers. "The board has approved a new position," Harper said, settling into her chair. "Director of Community Engagement, someone who would oversee our outreach programs, manage relationships with local organizations, and help ensure that our services actually meet community needs." Joseph had a feeling he knew where this conversation was heading, but he waited for Harper to continue. "The salary is $65,000 a year, plus full benefits for you and Marcus. The hours are mostly regular business hours, though there would be some evening community meetings and weekend health fairs." Harper paused, studying his face. "I can't think of anyone better qualified than someone who's actually lived the struggles our programs are designed to address." Joseph felt his breath catch. It was more money than he'd ever made, doing work that felt meaningful rather than just necessary. It would mean leaving the overnight custodial job that had been his lifeline for the past year, stepping into a role that required him to be visible and vocal rather than invisible and silent. "You don't have to answer now," Harper said quickly. "Take time to think about it. Discuss it with Marcus and Mrs. Patterson." Joseph looked out Harper's window at the bustling health center lobby, where Marcus was now showing a group of teenagers around the facility. His son caught his eye and waved, his face bright with enthusiasm for the work he was doing. "I don't need time to think about it," Joseph said, turning back to Harper. "Yes, absolutely, yes." Harper's smile was radiant. "Really? Really? Though I do have one condition." "Name it." "Mrs. Patterson gets her own office and a proper title. Community Wisdom Advisor doesn't fully capture how valuable she is to this operation." Harper laughed, the sound full of joy and relief. "Done. She can have whatever title she wants and any office in the building." As they shook hands on the agreement, Joseph felt something settle into place that had been missing since Sarah's death. A sense of purpose that went beyond just survival, beyond just getting through each day. He was going to be part of building something that mattered, something that would help families avoid the struggles his own family had endured. Outside Harper's office, the Wilson Community Health Center hummed with activity. Families receiving care, volunteers helping neighbors, medical professionals who had chosen service over profit. All of it made possible by a young woman who had refused to accept that healthcare had to be a business that valued money over mercy. And at the center of it all was the understanding that healing required more than just medicine. Sometimes it required a community willing to stand together, a hand extended in friendship, and the simple but revolutionary belief that everyone deserved care when they needed it most. 1 year after that fateful Monday morning confrontation, at Wilson Healthcare headquarters, Joseph found himself back in the familiar corridors of Metropolitan General Hospital. But this time, he wasn't pushing a cleaning cart or wearing scrubs stained with industrial disinfectant. Instead, he wore a comfortable business suit and carried a folder full of partnership agreements between the hospital and the Wilson Foundation's expanding community health network. The irony wasn't lost on him as he walked past the 10th floor family lounge where he'd first found Harper crying alone in the early hours of morning. That room had been transformed too. No longer just an elegant waiting area for wealthy families, but a genuine family support center staffed by counselors and volunteers who understood that healing extended far beyond medical procedures. Joseph, Dr. Matthews called out as he approached the nurse's station. The physician who had once been tasked with managing Richard Wilson's care now served as the hospital's liaison with the Foundation's programs. Perfect timing. I wanted to show you something. Dr. Matthews led him to a wall display that hadn't existed during Joseph's custodial days. It was covered with photos and letters from families who had been helped by the various foundation programs, the Emergency Assistance Fund, the sliding scale payment plans, the prescription support program, and the mobile health units that now served rural communities throughout the region. We get new letters every week, Dr. Matthews explained. Families wanting to thank the foundation, but more importantly, wanting to share their stories so other families know help is available. Joseph studied the display, recognizing several faces from the Community Health Center. Maria Santos and her daughter Isabella were featured prominently, along with an update on Isabella's continued health and academic success. Mrs. Patterson had contributed a letter describing how the Foundation's elder care program had helped her neighbors age in their own homes with dignity and support, but it was a handwritten note from a teenage boy that stopped Joseph in his tracks. My name is David Chen, and I'm 16 years old. Last year, my mom got sick and couldn't work for 3 months. We were going to lose our apartment because we couldn't pay for her medicine and rent at the same time. The Wilson Foundation's Emergency Assistance Program helped us keep our home and get my mom the treatment she needed. But more than that, they showed us that asking for help doesn't make you weak or worthless. Sometimes it just makes you human. I'm going to study medicine when I go to college, and I want to work for people like Harper Wilson, who understand that healthcare should be about healing families, not just treating diseases. Thank you for teaching me that communities take care of each other. Joseph felt his throat tighten as he read David's words. The boy's experience mirrored what Joseph's family had gone through, but with one crucial difference. David had found help before his family reached the breaking point, before the stress and financial pressure could tear them apart. There are hundreds more like that, Dr. Matthews said quietly. Families who didn't have to choose between treatment and keeping their homes. Parents who didn't have to watch their youngsters suffer because they couldn't afford care. It's remarkable what Harper and the Foundation have accomplished. Joseph nodded, thinking about the ripple effects of compassion. Harper's decision to help Marcus during his fever had seemed like a small act of kindness at the time, but it had grown into something that was transforming entire communities. Dr. Matthews, Joseph said, can I ask you something? That night, when Harper first used the Foundation account to pay for Marcus's urgent care visit, did you know she was taking a risk? The physician was quiet for a moment, considering the question. I knew it was irregular, he said finally. The usual protocols weren't followed, the paperwork wasn't complete, but I also knew that a frightened father was choosing between his job and his sick son, and a young woman was trying to solve that impossible situation the only way she could. And you let her do it. I let her be human, Dr. Matthews corrected. Sometimes, the most important medical decisions happen outside of medical protocols. Harper understood that healing a family requires more than just treating symptoms. They were interrupted by the arrival of Harper herself, accompanied by Marcus and a small group of teenagers wearing Wilson Foundation Youth Ambassador t-shirts. Marcus had grown another inch in the past few months, and his confidence had matured along with his height. The shy boy who had once worried about being a burden to his father now led tours and training sessions for new volunteers with natural ease. "Dad!" Marcus called out, his face lighting up when he saw Joseph. "Perfect timing. We're showing the new ambassadors around the hospital, explaining how the foundation programs work with traditional medical care." Joseph watched his son address the group of teenagers, explaining the importance of understanding both the medical and financial sides of healthcare. Marcus spoke with the authority of someone who had lived through medical crisis and financial hardship, but also with the hope of someone who had seen how communities could come together to solve problems that seemed insurmountable. "The thing you have to understand," Marcus was telling the group, "is that families dealing with medical emergencies are already scared and overwhelmed. Our job isn't to make them feel grateful for charity. Our job is to help them feel supported by their own community." Harper caught Joseph's eye and smiled. Over the past year, she had become like family, not just to Joseph and Marcus, but to Mrs. Patterson as well. The lonely young woman who had cried alone in hospital lounges had discovered what it meant to belong to something larger than herself. "How's your father doing?" Joseph asked as they walked together toward the elevator. "Stronger every day," Harper replied. "He's actually excited about the board meeting next week. We're presenting the 5-year expansion plan to create community health networks in 12 additional cities." The transformation of Richard Wilson had been perhaps the most surprising aspect of the entire experience. The man who had once dismissed his daughter's ideas as naive idealism now spoke at medical conferences about the business case for community-centered healthcare. He had become one of the Foundation's most effective advocates, using his corporate credibility to convince other executives that serving communities could be both morally right and financially sustainable. "He told me something last week that I keep thinking about," Harper continued. "He said that being unconscious for 3 weeks had given him clarity about what really mattered. When you're lying in a hospital bed, completely dependent on other people for your survival, you stop thinking about profit margins and start thinking about the humanity of the people caring for you." Joseph understood that perspective. His own experience of financial crisis had stripped away everything except what was truly essential: the love between him and Marcus, the kindness of neighbors like Mrs. Patterson, the simple but profound need for human beings to take care of each other. As they reached the elevator, Joseph looked back at the bustling hospital corridor. The same fluorescent lights still buzzed overhead. The same antiseptic smell lingered in the air, but something fundamental had changed. The building felt less like an institution and more like a place where healing actually happened. Not just medical healing, but the kind of healing that occurred when people felt seen, valued, and supported. "You know," Joseph said to Harper, as they waited for the elevator, "a year ago I thought success meant just surviving until tomorrow. Getting through each shift, paying each bill, making it to Marcus's next appointment." "And now?" Harper asked. Joseph thought about his new office at the Community Health Center, where families came not as desperate supplicants, but as community members seeking support from their neighbors. He thought about Marcus, who had transformed his own experience of struggle into a calling to help others. He thought about Mrs. Patterson, whose wisdom and kindness now had an official platform and the respect she had always deserved. "Now, I think success means building something that makes tomorrow better than today," he said. "Not just for your own family, but for all the families who are fighting the same battles you fought." Harper nodded, understanding passing between them without words. They had learned something important in those long nights at the hospital, something that had nothing to do with medical procedures or business strategies and everything to do with the simple courage required to extend your hand to a stranger in need. The elevator arrived, and as they stepped inside with Marcus and the youth ambassadors, Joseph felt the satisfaction that came from work that mattered. Outside, the city continued its daily rhythm of struggle and hope. But now there were places where families could find help before they reached the breaking point, where asking for assistance was met with understanding rather than judgment, where healing was understood to be about more than just medical care. Sometimes, Joseph reflected, the most profound changes began with the smallest acts of compassion. A night janitor stopping to comfort a crying stranger, a wealthy young woman choosing humanity over policy, a community deciding that taking care of each other wasn't charity, but simply what neighbors do. In the end, that was the lesson that mattered most. Healing wasn't something that happened to you, but something you participated in, both as someone who received care and someone who provided it. And the strongest communities were built by people who understood that everyone eventually would need both. 2 years later, on a warm spring evening, Joseph stood at the podium in the auditorium of the newly constructed Wilson Institute for Community Health. The building had been designed to reflect the foundation's values, open, welcoming spaces that felt more like a community center than a medical facility, with gardens and gathering areas that invited people to linger and connect, rather than simply receive services and leave. Tonight marked the graduation ceremony for the first class of Community Health Advocates, a program that Harper had developed to train local residents to serve as bridges between medical providers and the families they served. The 30 graduates represented a cross-section of the community. Former patients who wanted to help others navigate the healthcare system, parents who had learned to advocate for their families, teenagers like Marcus who had discovered their calling in service to others. When I first met Harper Wilson, Joseph began, his voice carrying clearly through the auditorium, I was working the night shift as a custodial worker, invisible to most of the people whose lives I moved around. My son, Marcus, was recovering from a serious injury. We were drowning in medical debt, and I felt like I was failing at the most important job I'd ever had, being his father. In the audience, Joseph could see Marcus sitting with the other youth ambassadors, now 17, and preparing for his senior year of high school. He had been accepted to several colleges with full scholarships, including Northwestern University, where Chloe was now finishing medical school. But Marcus had surprised everyone by announcing his intention to take a gap year to help launch the Community Health Advocate program in 3 new cities. I thought success meant just surviving, Joseph continued, getting through each day, each shift, each crisis without losing everything we had left. But Harper taught me that success isn't about what you survive. It's about what you build from the experience of having survived. Mrs. Patterson sat in the front row, now 81, and officially titled the Senior Community Wisdom Advisor for the Wilson Foundation. Her role had evolved from informal neighborhood helper to recognized expert in community-based support systems. She consulted with healthcare organizations across the country, sharing decades of experience in the simple but profound art of neighbors helping neighbors. The graduates we're celebrating tonight, Joseph said, gesturing toward the 30 men and women in caps and gowns, understand something that took me too long to learn. They understand that healing happens in community, that care is something we give and receive, and that the most powerful medicine is often the knowledge that you're not facing your struggles alone. Among the graduates was Maria Santos, whose daughter Isabella was now a healthy 12-year-old with dreams of becoming a doctor herself. Maria had become one of the program's most effective advocates, using her own experience to help Spanish-speaking families navigate complex medical systems. Her graduation project had been a bilingual resource guide that was now being used in community health centers across the state. Also graduating was David Chen, the teenager whose letter had moved Joseph so deeply 2 years earlier. Now 18, David had spent his senior year of high school working with the foundation while completing his studies. His final project had focused on mental health support for teenagers dealing with family medical crises, a topic he understood from painful personal experience. These graduates will return to their communities not as experts or professionals, Joseph continued, but as neighbors who have learned to transform their own experiences of struggle into tools for helping others. They understand that the most credible voice in a hospital waiting room often belongs not to someone with a medical degree, but to someone who has sat in those same uncomfortable chairs, worried about the same impossible choices, and found a way through. In the audience, Harper wiped away tears as she listened to Joseph speak. At 27, she had been named CEO of Wilson Healthcare after her father decided to focus his energy on expanding the foundation's work. Under her leadership, the company had become a model for how large healthcare systems could serve communities while remaining financially sustainable. The Wilson model was now being studied and replicated across the country, proving that compassionate care and sound business practices were not mutually exclusive. The work you're about to begin, Joseph told the graduates, will not always be easy. You'll encounter systems that seem designed to frustrate rather than help. You'll meet families who have been told no so many times they've stopped believing that yes is possible. You'll face bureaucracies that value efficiency over empathy, and insurance companies that treat human suffering as acceptable collateral damage in pursuit of profit. Richard Wilson sat beside Harper, now fully recovered and serving as chairman of the Wilson Foundation. His near-death experience had fundamentally changed his perspective on what constituted a life well lived. He spent his days working with other healthcare executives, sharing the business case for community-centered care and proving that serving people and serving shareholders were not incompatible goals. But you'll also discover something that I learned during those long nights at Metropolitan General Hospital, Joseph continued. You'll discover that individual acts of compassion, when multiplied across a community, become powerful enough to change systems that seemed immutable. You'll learn that sometimes the most important word in healthcare isn't diagnosis or treatment, it's hope. Behind Joseph on the stage sat the faculty who had developed the Community Health Advocate Program. Dr. Martinez had left her position at the Community Health Center to lead the institute's training programs. Chloe Wilson, now Dr. Wilson, served as the program's medical director while completing her residency in family medicine. Randy Coleman, Joseph's former supervisor, had become the program's logistics coordinator, bringing his understanding of healthcare operations to the curriculum. In closing, Joseph said, looking out over the audience filled with graduates, families, community leaders, and healthcare professionals, I want to share something that Marcus wrote in his college application essay. He wrote, I used to think that needing help was a sign of weakness, but I've learned that being willing to help others is a sign of strength. And the strongest communities are built by people who understand that everyone will need both, to be helped and to help many times throughout their lives. Marcus stood and nodded toward his father, his face bright with pride and affection. The shy, worried boy, who had once felt like a burden, had grown into a young man who saw his own struggles as preparation for a life of service to others. These graduates understand that truth, Joseph concluded. They've lived it, survived it, and now they're ready to share it. They know that healing isn't just about fixing what's broken. It's about building communities strong enough to prevent things from breaking in the first place. And when prevention isn't possible, it's about making sure that no one has to face their darkest moments alone. The applause that followed was warm and sustained, but Joseph barely heard it. He was thinking about that night 3 years ago when he'd found Harper crying in the family lounge, how her simple act of paying for Marcus's medical care had set In motion, a chain of events that had transformed not just their lives, but the lives of thousands of families across the region. As the ceremony concluded and families gathered to congratulate the graduates, Joseph watched the interactions around him with deep satisfaction. Former patients embraced current advocates. Healthcare professionals shared stories with community members. Teenagers who had been helped by the Foundation's programs talked excitedly about their own plans to pursue careers in medicine and social work. Harper approached him as the crowd began to thin, her face glowing with the satisfaction that came from work that mattered. "Beautiful speech," she said, reaching out to squeeze his hand. "My grandmother would have loved this, seeing all these people committed to taking care of each other." Joseph smiled, thinking about the young woman who had once sat alone in hospital corridors, isolated by wealth and family expectations. She had found her way to belonging, to purpose, to the kind of deep satisfaction that came from using your resources to lift others up rather than to build walls around yourself. "You know what the best part is?" Joseph asked, gesturing toward Marcus, who was explaining the Youth Ambassador program to a group of younger teenagers. "What's that? In 20 years, when these graduates are training the next generation of advocates, they won't just be teaching skills and procedures. They'll be passing on something much more important, the understanding that taking care of each other isn't just what we do in emergencies. It's how we build communities worth living in." Harper nodded, her eyes following Joseph's gaze to where Mrs. Patterson was surrounded by graduates seeking her advice and wisdom. The elderly woman who had started out as a neighbor helping neighbors had become the heart of a movement that was changing how communities thought about care and support. "Sometimes," Harper said softly, "I think about that night when you found me crying, and I wonder what would have happened if you had just kept walking." Joseph considered the question seriously. "Someone else would have stopped," he said finally. "Maybe not that night, maybe not the next night, but eventually. Because that's what people do when they see someone hurting. They stop, they ask if they can help, they extend their hand." "You really believe that?" Joseph looked around the auditorium, at the graduates celebrating with their families, at the healthcare professionals who had chosen service over profit, at the community members who had committed to supporting their neighbors through good times and bad. "I have to believe it," he said, "because it's the only way any of this works. The only way we build communities where everyone can thrive, where asking for help is met with understanding rather than judgment, where healing happens not just in hospitals and clinics, but in the connections between people who choose to care for each other." As they walked toward the exit together, Joseph felt the deep contentment that came from work that had meaning beyond paychecks and performance reviews. The night custodian, who had once pushed a cleaning cart through empty hospital corridors, had become someone who helped build bridges between struggling families and the resources they needed to survive and thrive. But more than that, he had learned the most important lesson of all, that the measure of a life well lived wasn't what you accumulated or achieved, but what you built for others, what you left behind that made the world a little more compassionate, a little more, just a little more like the kind of place where everyone could find help when they needed it, and meaning when they were ready to provide it. Outside, the spring evening was warm and full of promise. In communities across the region, families were receiving care without fear of bankruptcy. Teenagers were discovering their calling in service to others, and neighbors were learning that taking care of each other wasn't charity. It was simply the foundation upon which all strong communities were built. And in hospital corridors that had once echoed with the footsteps of a lonely night janitor, new stories of compassion and hope were being written every day, one act of kindness at a time. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.